everyone. As Professor Pursley just said, my name is Amanda Samanchik, and I will be telling you a bit about Miss Fontaine. Tessa Fontaine is the author of The Electric Woman, a memoir in death-defying acts, which was awarded as a New York Times Editor's Choice, named as Best Book of 2018 by Southern Living, Amazon Editors, and Refinery 29, as well as New York Post's Most Unforgettable Book of 2018. Fontaine was raised outside of San Francisco, received her MFA from the University of Alabama, and was a doctoral student in creative writing at the University of Utah. In 2013, Fontaine joined the last American traveling circus sideshow, The World of Wonders. She is currently living in North Carolina and teaching at Warren Wilson College. Fontaine has garnered a fan base of readers by retelling stories of her own life, which could be seen as so outrageous that it could be fictitious. It's an honor to have her speak at the 14th Annual Literary Festival, and it is my absolute pleasure to introduce to you all Ms. Tessa Fontaine.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Amanda, for that kind introduction, and John and the students for putting on this festival against so many odds, getting here and getting us all together. And thank you for the interpreter for being here and for helping to translate my words. I really appreciate it. I also just, was really enjoying Maggie and Son's readings too. So just joy all around. So I'm going to read from The Electric Woman today, and if we were in person, you'd be able to see this a little bit better. My readerly copy has been on the road with me for a long time, and not too long ago, I was giving a reading and left the book out, and the house I was staying at had an anxious dog, and I came home from dinner and she had edited it for me. So I now keep this as my lucky copy. So I'm going to read a couple excerpts from here, one slightly longer excerpt first, and then a few shorter pieces. And this first one I'm actually going to read from my computer. It's a little bit easier for a Zoom reading, so let me pull it up. Okay. So this comes, the book sort of follows 150 days on the road where I was performing in America's Last Traveling Circus Sideshow, as Amanda mentioned. And this comes day 23 of 150. And this chapter is called "And the Low Sky Opens." Behind the Gravitron 3000's crown of American flags, the sky is looking more and more like a bruise. Even the performers from California, half of us earthquake people, know that a sky going green and purple means tornado. And one by one, the mermaid and knife thrower and fire eater peek around the edge of the tent between acts to look directly into the emptying carnival midway. The low sky opens with rain and bursts of wind that knock over a tank of Rastafarian painted hermit crabs beside our show. The fire eater widens her eyes at Tommy the Talker, our boss, and her on-again, off-again boyfriend. She hisses, "Thomas, close the show." They've been slamming their trailer door for days. He shakes his head no, and everyone ducks back. But not Red. Red, a lifer, stands in front of the big striped circus tent in his kilt, arms crossed over his bare belly. Inside, he has just swallowed a tire iron. Here, he appraises a ceiling of clouds as a dribble of spit weaves through his red beard stubble. "Well," he says in a voice barely audible over the wind, "I know I'm gonna die on these stages. Today's as good a day as any for that." He claps his hands with false finality and turns back into the tent. I nod in agreement. I know this doesn't make much sense, but the corsets I wore and the chains I escaped and the taxidermied Icelandic giant I glued back together all precluded danger from feeling much like danger. Or maybe it was the bright lights, or that it felt a little good to be reminded that there was always more that could be lost. Look here, born alive and the strangest of them all, enter this house now, this faraway domestic scene. A man wakes in the dark to research how to visit a Venetian glass museum in a wheelchair. Tours of the David for the handicapped. Bathroom dimensions in a cruise ship's dining hall. When light comes in the window, he goes back into the bedroom and sits on his wife's side of the bed. She stirs, her good leg bending and straightening. "Morning, cutie," he says, leaning low to wrap his arms around her torso before he pulls her upright and shifts her hip so her legs reach down off the bed. "Na, na, na," she says quietly, hoarsely. She presses and releases her lips with little smacks just after she wakes every morning, like each new day has a taste she wants inside. Their daughter stands in the hallway watching their negotiation while thinking of a troupe of sideshow performers. She'd seen the performers stand unblinking in front of knife boards. They take fire into their mouths, swords into their bellies. They control their own pain. She'll leave to join them in 1 week. Her mother is out of the hospital after 1 year. Give her a round of applause. Tommy and I stand in the drizzle on our ballet stage. "You don't have to wait, but you do have to hurry," Tommy bellows, and he's cut off by the loudspeaker announcing a pygmy goat parade. My wrists throb. I've escaped these handcuffs 13 times today, but that's the job here. A little pain, a little delight, always a calculation. What will it take to woo the 2 teenage girls yawning as they watch our ballet? "Look at my danger," I urge through a squint in my eyes. "Imagine yourself locked up." One of the girls starts texting. "Look here, they'll dazzle." With one arm slipped beneath the woman's good arm and one arm reaching over her bad one, the man pulls her upright, his body standing in for her right side, and they pivot to the wheelchair. "She has the softest skin of any person I've ever known," he told me when I was young, when I was a teenager, recently at the hospital. "It's surreal. Here, touch it. No, touch it." As an act of kindness or apology for this tragedy, a lot of people give the woman lotion. It comes in the mail, in birthday packages on the doorstep. Maybe they know about the skin, want to help preserve that miracle. But the daughter finds herself when she can help clean out the drawers with an armload of lotions: lilac, eucalyptus, fresh linen, in glass bottles and blue jars, plastic tubs, oblong or circular, organic, elixirs, tubes for the eyes, for daytime, for scars, for nighttime. And the metaphor of trying to carry so much is too obvious and also fundamentally right. That leaning stack piled against her chest, even though she knows it will tumble. The house they rent is entirely covered in wood slats like the hull of a ship. It seems that they might always be about to embark. The woman's in her wheelchair. They've named it Bubbles. She spends all her time there, except for when he lifts her onto or off of the toilet or into or out of the bed or the car. Occasionally, the daughter lifts her onto or out of something, but she often feels like an intruder. There's so much tenderness required for transporting a paralyzed body. Sometimes she hides in the other room when it's time because she is a small, scared person. Sometimes she finds herself laughing there, alone, both hands over her mouth for no reason. In the off-season, Red lives in a van with his 2 cats in Florida, where the thick, hot air is heavy as a costume. He lists his orphanage and foster home addresses, one after the other. The addresses are tied to names to memories, like when he was 16 and opened the door of his foster house one morning and peered out at the snow piled high on the street. It was February, cold. He stepped outside and then took another step and another. He didn't stop. Walking is, in its most basic form, the act of falling and catching yourself. He walked for 31 days, from Philadelphia to New Orleans. The carnival was in town, Red says, and they were looking for guys to run the rides. A few days later, he met a family of gypsies operating a small sideshow. They were looking for a new sword swallower, said, if you learn to swallow swords, you can come with us. It was the first time anyone had offered to keep him around. That was 47 years ago. Red pounds the flat steel face of a gearhead tent stake further into the dirt with a sledgehammer. The ting, 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 an occasional spark just over my right shoulder as I wink to the teenagers. I'm learning the art of distraction. Thunder cracks. Red prepares for the deluge. Now watch Miss Mimi Lamore escape from these chains. Her world record is 5 seconds. Can she break it? Tommy says and begins the countdown. I plant my feet hip distance apart and take a deep breath. 5, he shouts, and I spin fast to face the tent behind me, my back to the audience. 4, throwing my arms down hard in front of me to loosen the chains, Red pounding the steel. 3, 1, and then the other wrist is out, and lightning flashes, and I have the chains in one hand, start my spin back to face the audience. 2, but the loudspeaker interrupts. Attention, fairgoers. This is a tornado warning. All attendees of the Lucas County Fair must evacuate the fairgrounds immediately. And the thunder cracks again right on cue, and everyone on the fairgrounds is suddenly moving very quickly. Banners, Tommy screams back into our massive tent. I clamber down the ballet stage, already drenched, as the 7 other performers meet me out front. The banner bearing the 2-headed Egyptian princess billows and snaps like a ship's sail, cracking and giving into the storm. I imagine the tornado splitting all the banners down the line, the boom of toppling poles like cannon fire, the ship below suddenly tipping and sloshing as the waves crash further onto the deck, the ship 4 days out to sea and unrescuable while deckhands are tossed into the waves, and then it isn't deckhands flailing as they sink below the churning sea, it's my mom, her paralyzed body sinking like stone. Banners, go, 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 the knife thrower screams. Hands are flying, sequins throwing off the rein. We yank the slip tie off the metal pole, unwind the rope holding the top of the banner's taut, its tail splashing into the mud below. Breathing hard, we wrap and wrench the ropes around each of the canvas rolls, muscles shaking, looping slip knots and cinching, squeezing each banner tight, squinting against the onslaught. Tighter, Tommy is screaming. Each of these banners, a few $100 we can't afford to replace. I see the body she works hard every day to keep alive betraying her as it sinks. I see this because I have a heart bursting with fear, because I should feel fear here inside a tent as a tornado descends, but I don't. I fear only for her. My mom doesn't have half the bone plate in her head anymore, as in no skull on one side. She can't do things like get on an airplane because we rely on that bone to keep the pressure stable in our brain. She's had multiple strokes and more emergency, this is the end, say goodbye right this second than I can actually count or remember anymore, 8, 10. And so moving her body further than 10 minutes from a hospital is totally and completely out of the question. And now she is finally home, though continued emergencies take them back to the hospital regularly. And just when my brother and I and the rest of our family think we can take a breath and try to figure out how to make this kind of life normal, we hear this. Fuck it. It's from my stepdad. He clicks. Buy 2 tickets on a ship bound for Europe. If we're gonna die soon, we might as well die somewhere beautiful, he says. And so my parents are about to leave on a trip to Italy. Nobody thinks they'll return. Ropes slap the mud puddles and spray. Mascara and eyeshadow smear our faces. My fishnets are splattered, and as I'm running to the next banner, my heel sinks into the puddle and I stagger, my shin hitting a rusted stake which grabs and rips my fishnets, cuts my leg open. Blood. Go, 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 Tommy screams, pointing to the next banner, and I go. You want to know about bravery? Red asks backstage that morning. We'd heard there was a possible storm approaching. We're tying down extra poles. If you were paying attention, he says, you would hear laughter all the time. Even breathing is laughing. I look over at him, waiting for the completion of his thought, but he's staring out the stage door, expressionless. Look here, ladies and gentlemen. This next act drained the blood from my head the first time I saw it. The woman's back is to her daughter, wheelchair scooted right up against the couch. The woman stoops slightly forward and then straightens up, her left arm disappearing in front of her and then arcing out wide as she straightens again, a gray t-shirt between her fingers. A pile of clean laundry lies on the couch in front of her, t-shirts, socks, bras, sweatpants, that the daughter had been planning on folding very soon, any day now, in fact. But here she is, the mother she knows, the mother she spends hours convincing herself isn't the same person living inside her body anymore. Because what would that be like? How would it be possible to carry on? Here she is, with a rumpled gray t-shirt between her fingers, shaking the wrinkles out. The daughter holds her breath. The mother shakes like this a lot, little spasms. Sometimes big ones, seizures. And now she's using that little shake to complete a domestic task the daughter hasn't seen in almost 3 years. She sets the t-shirt down on the couch, away from the pile of laundry, and smooths it flat with the palm of her hand. She cannot see the daughter behind her. Here is her bony hand, the one that was always covered in colors from her textile business, and more recently, the hand that was hooked up to so many IVs that it took on its own face and attitude, a medical Medusa. That hand was the only thing that moved in the first months when it didn't appear she'd ever really wake back up. The daughter watched it like watching would conjure a prayer. Watched it twitch against the starch white hospital sheets, move slowly up from her side, trembling toward her head to touch the skin covering her brain on the half of her head where her skull had been removed. Watched it touch her eye, here, now here, dried blood, dried rivers of brain fluid against her temples. She'd watched that hand make its way back home to her side, tremble, and begin it all again, that journey up to try to understand what was missing here and here and here. She'd grab it and kiss it still and whisper terrible apologies, and the hand would rest calm for a moment before it pulled away, ready to move on. She moved on, and then they made her come back. The rain falls harder and harder, sheets and buckets and daggers of it hitting me from every direction as the wind makes it impossible to hear nearly anything but the high-pitched cry of emergency coming from somewhere I can't see. Carnies run toward the cinder block bathrooms. On the other side of the fence, 1 or 2 fairgoers linger, a few cars speed away, but mostly they're gone. Just as they do each night, carnival bosses shut the gates around the fairgrounds, locking our performers and hundreds of carnies inside. Seek immediate shelter, a policeman calls through a megaphone. But Big Ben has a 9-foot boa constrictor across his arms and is slowly coiling her back into her box. He's in no hurry. There's work to be done. He purses his full pink lips at the snake, kissing her on the mouth as hard rain drenches him and the thunder cracks. The sirens bounce off the cow barn. Rain pounds. Red screams for us to untie the tent's sidewalls, thick vinyl 70 feet across by 40 feet deep. A huge gust of wind could find any opening and pick the tent up from the inside, ripping it open or carrying it into the sky. This will not happen today. We will not be afraid. Are you crazy? Get to the bathrooms, a carny with a snarl of blonde curls hollers as he runs. It is time to go. The wind plasters our hair to our faces and then all of a sudden stops dead. A second, two, and then it picks back up again, the tree branches whipping one another as they're stripped of their leaves, the flags on top of our tent snapping and cracking. Gold glitter smears across the mermaid's face beside me. I catch her eye for a moment and it's wide and spooked, but goes right back to the ropes she's tying. It is time to go. We live in the back of a semi-truck and we won't leave. We make $3 an hour and we won't leave. Inside the tent, we dart and dodge one another, locking the mummy cases, tying up curtains, gathering knives. We twist and tie, we lock and pin. The Fiji mermaid is safe in her coffin. The headless woman's mirrored chair is well wrapped in wet pillows. The Queen Kong isn't the last taxidermied gorilla in the world. Her presence here, alongside her freak family, makes the extraordinary individuals a collective of ordinary love. And that is reason to tie her blankets tighter despite the opening sky. Look here. In their grand finale, the two great American daredevils will leave on a ship for Italy just after the daughter leaves on a plane for the sideshow. Get their autograph now. Get it while you can. The woman's palm flattens the t-shirt's creases with careful rhythms and precisions against the couch. The daughter never helps. The woman folds in one worn sleeve and then the other, smooths the collar, evens out the sides. Her other hand remains tucked, unmoving in her lap, but this hand is grabbing the bottom of the t-shirt and folding it up against the shirt's shoulders, creating a rectangle perfect for stacking in drawers. This little miracle of normalcy on a couch in a wooden house on a cool spring evening. The daughter makes a sound and the woman swivels her head and looks at her daughter for just a moment. She lets out a little silent laugh. She cannot talk or walk, but this, here it is, a chore, ordinary life. Tommy finally yells for us to get the hell out of there, though it's almost impossible to hear. The rest of the fairground is emptied of people, and the wind is throwing hair across our faces like whips, and the sky is mauve. The fire eater, the knife thrower, the mermaid, and I all run, no longer able to dodge puddles, past small tree branches that have come down, past food tents leaning sharply away from the wind, and finally make it to the cinder block bathroom already stuffed with carnies. We're breathing hard, can barely see for the makeup smeared across our faces, the membrane of storm water covering our bodies. We take paper towels to wipe our eyes and laugh with the hysteria of danger, unsure what else to do. The fire eater inspects my cuts. I inspect hers. "Where's Red?" she finally asks. We look around, but he has not made it to the bathrooms. Someone with a weather radio says the tornado has touched down a mile from our carnival. We push past the other carnies standing in the doorway and peek our heads out at the bathroom's mouth, craning our necks toward our big tent down the driveway, our big tent down the midway. It's almost impossible to make out what's what, but I'm pretty sure I see Red just outside our tent. Two of the center ropes wrapped around his hands as he throws his body back against the wind, fighting that tornado himself. A battle anyone would say that there is no way he could actually win. I can see him there, open-mouthed, laughing up at the sky. All right, so that is the end of that excerpt. So I'm going to take a drink. So one of the things that I think is really meaningful to me about this experience of getting to travel with the sideshow performers and get to be part of this world and then get to write this book about them is what it feels like to get to participate in something, an environment that has been so welcoming to outsiders for so long. For many years, the sideshow was a place that accepted particularly like LGBTQ people who had not been accepted by their community, and the sideshow accepted them. And this was true for a lot of people. And the sideshow has its own complicated history with putting people on display for really horrific reasons. And the sideshow also was a place that accepted a lot of folks and enabled people to make livings in ways that they wouldn't have been able to. So it's a complicated place, and that is one of the things that makes it so interesting for me. And as a writer, I guess I just want to make a plug for what it feels like to follow your obsessions. And for all of the writers and readers who are listening right now, how valuable I think it is to let your weirdness and your obsessions guide you. I was really interested in sideshows, and I didn't understand what my attraction to all of its complicated history and kind of the complicated experience of being in a sideshow. I didn't understand what all that was until I went there and I was on the road for a full season and I experienced it, and then I was writing about it. And through that, I was able to kind of learn the stories of all of these amazing people and try to share these stories. And so all of that is to say, follow your weirdness, follow the thing that feels so compelling to you, even if you don't understand why it's compelling, and see, what kind of stories you can tell, what kind of stories you can find, and particularly looking at stories kind of outside of the mainstream. So let that be my hashtag for the moment. Follow your weirdness. Okay, I'm gonna read two more just really short little sections. One is kind of in the line of following the weirdness. As I was doing a lot of research about the sideshow and learning kind of about its complicated history, I was amazed to learn that the sideshow has actually played a really important role in some medical history. And so I'm just going to read about a page that kind of tells this one little story as an example of that. Sometimes a sideshow can save a daughter. A 2-pound baby deemed a weakling by the hospital is expected to die. It's 1920. And hospitals do not have neonatal facilities. Story goes, the baby's father wraps the baby, Lucille Horn is her name, in a blanket, hails a taxi outside the hospital, and heads to the sideshow at Coney Island. The baby's twin had just died in birth, and he is not willing to lose both children. Up until the second half of the 20th century, hospitals did not have equipment to keep premature babies alive. When Lucille's father arrived at the sideshow, a sign charging admission 25 cents was up over the door. Inside, all along the walls, teensy, preemie babies of every race and class were on display in steel and glass incubators. Some cried, others slept in a swaddle. The exhibit was run by Dr. Martin Cooney, a pioneer in neonatal incubator research. The medical community, though, was more than skeptical. Dr. Cooney funded his research by charging admission to see these tiny babies in their translucent worlds. Over his long career displaying the babies from 1896 to 1940, they were also shown at World's Fairs, amusement parks, and anywhere else he could find an audience. The money enabled Dr. Cooney to keep the babies alive without cost to their parents. It's unclear whether he studied with some of the pioneering doctors of the time who he claims to have studied with, and even more dubious whether he actually was a medical doctor at all. Regardless, he kept thousands of babies alive, 6,500 of the 8,000 who came into his care. They would have otherwise died. Dr. Cooney passed away in 1950, not long after his incubators were finally accepted by hospitals for regular medical practice. After 6 months in the incubator, Lucille went home to her parents. She lived for 96 more years. So kind of just an amazing piece of sideshow history there, that the way that we keep alive premature babies and babies born who need to be in an incubator now came through the sideshow, came through this display. Okay, so I'll read one last short section, and again, I'm just very honored to be here. Thank you so much for having me. Okay. Chris Christ is hunched on a stool with hands as big as truck tires and his 2 continual streams of black snuff running from the corners of his mouth. "Tess," he shouts, "time to learn." He knows every act backward and forward and is a forever chimp trainer and knife thrower. A former chimp trainer and knife thrower. "Stand here," he says, pointing beside him. His legs are stretched straight and wide from the stool. Maybe this should be a moment of hesitation, but I don't hesitate. He puts one hand on my clavicle and one hand on my forehead and presses. "Stand up straight," he says, "straighter." It's early evening and there's a pause in our regular day, a storm, lightning nearby. It's temporarily shut down the fair. He pushes my head back until I am staring straight up into the eye of our tent's center pole. "You've got to be lined up perfectly straight," he says, "or you will never get the sword down." In India, fakirs, beginning as early as 2000 BCE, swallowed swords and walked across hot coals, handled snakes and stepped on broken glass as ascetic tributes to the divine, as assertions of power, connection, and invulnerability. What is a body if you take its power over you away? Loose, carny children dripping rainwater peek under our tent's side wall. It's pouring. Chris has decided it's time for me to swallow swords. It's one of the only acts I haven't yet learned, but we all need to know every act in case anything happens to anyone, the giant says. It feels good to put the blade in my mouth. But good isn't quite the right word for how it feels to have the metal inside. It isn't complicated enough. It feels dangerous and important, one of the pinnacle sideshow acts, and it hurts. Something jammed in the throat leads to gagging and the rise of bile. There are 3 sphincters to pass in the throat and esophagus, a body's emergency brakes. Do you want to know the secret to all the sideshow acts right now? Are you ready? Untrain your instincts. Unlearn self-preservation. There are 5 big caged lights hanging from the tent's center poles that emit a soft buzz against the storm dark. The wet earth smell has, for a moment, overtaken the funnel cake and corn dog grease that hangs in the air all day. A wrong wrist twitch, and the sword inside might pierce my lungs, might nick my heart. Tommy has folded a coat hanger into a sword for practice, which he made by straightening a wire hanger all the way out, doubling it, and then twisting a handle. Mimicking him, I lick both sides and tilt my head back, let the metal rest on my tongue. Anything can happen to anyone. Last season, the knife thrower flung his blade at the board and it landed in his longtime partner's thigh. She was taken to the hospital for stitches, but 30 minutes later, when their act came around again and she was still gone, another cast member had to go stand on the board. She had to know how to go stand on the board, as if she didn't know how blood looks falling down the angles of fishnets. Had to know how to immediately erase memory. That's the predictable kind of crisis in this business, of course, and the predictable victim. But there's a whole carnival of bodies being whipped through space on big machines, and sex, and meth, and the momentary elation of being the object of attention under those bright stage lights. And the truth is, there are potential crises all around at every minute. I heave. My throat's gag keeps catching, and I cough hard, waiting for the vomit to rise. When I pull the sword out a quarter inch, the quarter inch it's gone down, the metal has flecks of white and clear fluid on the tip. Some people are naturals, Red says. He watches me attempt a few swallows and cough. And some people are not, he says, staring me down. I'll stop there. Thank you so much for having me. It's really been an honor. Thank you. Be weird, follow the weirdness. Take care out there.